Connecticut and Massachusetts, Z&M Homes buys houses. Sell your property to the local guys.
Needs repairs, updates, maybe foreclosure or inherited? No problem. We got you. Google or add us on Facebook at ZANDMHomes.com.
It's Baxie's musical podcast. Resistance is useless.
If you ask most Americans what they know about the country of Norway, the answer is probably going to center around the Vikings and a Beatles song about wood. Other than that, that's pretty much all we got. The truth is, Norway is bursting with a rich, dynamic culture, a long history of international athletic competition, delicious cheeses, and plenty of artistic significance that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. Now, the only reason I know any of this is because I had to look it up. And because I'm an ignorant American, the only reason I looked it up was because my guest today is Fredrik Saroea from the Norwegian electro rock band Datarock. Now, before you say, who is Datarock, you should be aware that for the last 23 years, Datarock's music has been featured by Coca-Cola, Apple, Google, Logitech, and several video game releases. Their music has been used all over American TV, including MTV, Nick Jr., and Comedy Central. It's been featured in several films as well. And while the name Datarock may not be completely familiar to you, you've likely heard their music without even knowing about it, because that's how it was for me as well. But here's the thing. Datarock is a band who's released 5 full-length albums and several EPs, and they've also released 21 singles, and they're awesome. The music of Datarock is quirky, danceable, and wickedly inventive. Their music is both retro, and it also seems like it's from the future. Try figuring that out. Datarock is a band that is totally worth getting familiar with, and their latest album, Media Consumption Pyramid, is no different. It also doesn't hurt when your lead singer's got a lot to say with a wicked sense of humor and a gigantic bag of great stories to go along with it. This is my conversation with Fredrik Saroea, also known as Rocksteady Freddy, from Datarock on Baxie's musical podcast. Rocksteady Freddy.
That's my name.
That is it, man. I tell you what, I have had so much fun gearing up for this interview, and I'm listening to some of the older songs, and I'm realizing I've been listening to Datarock songs for years, and I didn't even know it. I feel like I'm the last to know.
No, really? Okay. Are you serious? Okay, so where have you heard us if you didn't know it was us?
Well, it's funny because I mean I've heard fa 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 in other uses other than just on record, and then I realized, oh my God, I do know these guys, and it didn't connect to me right away, but I've had so much fun listening to it. I mean, and the thing about it is the story of this band I think is absolutely a fascinating one. I mean, you guys are a bunch of friends in high school. You start a band, no expectations of being success, and literally just in it to have fun. That's how everybody starts.
Yeah, that's how everybody should start.
But for you guys, things just blow up, and they blow up fast. You make a record, and out of nowhere, Fa 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 becomes this. Some of the biggest companies in the world are glomming onto this and using it for their own marketing. Tell me how this all happened. It seems so improbably crazy to me.
No, but it is, and I mean, I think we were very lucky to be there at that right time, right? Because when online started happening, I don't think the major labels knew how to handle it, And every time you met, because back then, people working on digital marketing and distribution they were simply called online. They were online,
right?
You know what I mean? And these people were very young, right? So the guys who came out of whatever college education handling the digital aspects of even major labels, they were like 20 something, and they probably liked us because we were kind of young and weird and crazy. So what happened, I think, was that marketing people and club promoters and festival booking teams and whatnot, they saw that suddenly the globally trending bands weren't your typical super well-established household bands, but you had MySpace bands.
Sure.
Right.
So
out of nowhere, you have this huge global social media long before Facebook and all of that, and kind of very different to like old school forums with just walls. Here you could also stream the music. You can see photos. You can even interact with the artist. And we befriended people all over the world. And somehow we ended up being front page of MySpace for 2 weeks, right? Which means 28 million people would see our faces every day when they open MySpace globally. And we were so used to communicating with people online at the time, right? Because we were here in Norway, and ever since we started, everybody we knew were kind of pen pals around the world. You know, people would order a CD from us. We would actually mail it in the mail, or we made our own homepage. So we actually had a streaming variation on our homepage. So when all of this stuff with MySpace happened, to us it was just like, that's what happens. That's been happening for years, but we didn't understand how big MySpace was. So basically, just a few months after we were, I think it was Artist of the Week or whatever it was called. So, anyways, opening page, everybody logged. When you logged in, you saw Datarock, and it was easy to press play, and you heard Datarock, right? And so basically, we went from 0 to 100 this way. So we're featured artists on MySpace. And then a couple of months later, we get a phone call from Coca-Cola. Right?
I think about the way social media works today, and with the heavy algorithm, there's no way you could have any post available visually for 2 weeks. I mean, unless you're going to drop a ton of money on
No.
Facebook or Instagram ads. I mean, it's just the algorithm is such such horseshit. But yet, the fact that
no, you're right. And also back then, I mean, we started in 2000, and this was 2006, I think, 5 or 6. I don't remember exactly when it was. The album was released March 2005, but I don't think this happened until pretty far into the kind of life of that album. And things were still moving so slowly that, I mean, you remember CSS,
sure,
and digitalism and justice and all of this, and a song was kind of new for years. Remember? A song was brand new for like 3 years.
So you get this phone call from Coca-Cola wanting to use this. I mean, you guys must just have been floored by this. I mean, it's like, they're one of the biggest companies in the world, and here they are. Just, I wouldn't even believe them if Coke started to call me.
No, and I didn't either, because I was coincidentally I was in Amsterdam to play at a place called Paradiso, and that was kind of a big deal because I think Flaming Lips was playing the day before. So I mean, anyways, we were in Amsterdam, Paradiso, and I remember me and my songwriting partner Kjetil Mosnes, we were sitting backstage drinking beer, and we were like, what are we doing? We're adults. Why are we sitting here at this punk tour? And out of the blue, this reach out comes along, and it wasn't directly from Coca-Cola. It was coincidentally, it was a Dutch company called Wheaton and Kennedy, and we were in Amsterdam at the time. Coincidentally, the day before we wasn't, the day after we wasn't. No, we took it seriously because, but we didn't realize it was a global campaign. We were just thinking, okay, so there must be a Coca-Cola ad for Netherlands or something like that, But then I'll tell you a really hilarious thing. At the time, we had befriended these guys from London on a tour in Australia that year, because we were touring with James Brown, which is also fucking crazy. We shared a backstage with James Brown.
All right, hold on to that one, because I want to hear about James Brown. But go ahead.
No, that's a pretty crazy story. But on that tour, I'm just going to mention James Brown was touring with 27 people. We were the 3 of us. We didn't even have a sound engineer or anything. So, we didn't think we were going to play the main stage of that tour. So we thought we were going to just play a little tent in the corner of the touring festival, But when we realized we played the main stage on a stadium tour, we were kind of embarrassed for not having, musicians on stage. And we really didn't have any equipment. We were traveling with hand luggage. Like our entire backing tracks. Our entire backing track production we just sent from a goddamn mini disc. You remember the mini discs? and our synthesizer was a Casio MT64, which I think you can buy for something like $25, And then we had a guitar and then a bass guitar. That's it. That's what we were traveling with. So I befriended the drummer of one of the other bands because he was there, was going to be there every night. So I just asked him, would you mind just playing drums with us for a couple of songs? Because it's kind of embarrassing being on stage in front of 25,000 people, and just to fill it in. You don't have to be particularly into the song, just play a beat, whatever. So I explained 5 songs to him, and he came on stage with us, played a show for 25,000 people flawlessly,
Right.
without any rehearsals or anything. I just explained the songs for him right before we went on stage. So he became a really dear friend, and we actually visited him for the release of this album, even on Friday in London. Anyways, this is the hilarious thing. His brother was the band leader of Robbie Williams. So when Robbie Williams wrote that $200 million contract in 2006, I don't know if you remember, but in 2006 he wrote world history's biggest music contract prior to Madonna and all of that, right?
Right, it was huge.
It was huge. And then this drummer and his brother and this whole group of friends that we had befriended, they were the people around Robbie Williams. So I called them and I said, hey, who handled that goddamn contract for Robbie Williams? Because that must have been someone who knew what they were doing. And then they say, okay, it's these guys called Statham Jill Davis, and they gave us the contact. And the first thing I did when I realized Coca-Cola contacted us was I got the same solicitor who handled Robbie Williams' $200 million contract to deal with Coca-Cola, because we didn't know how to respond to something like a Coca-Cola ad. What the hell? So that was so we went from not ever being represented by any kind of lawyer or manager or anything, going straight to writing the contract with Coca-Cola with the same solicitor who did the $200 million contract.
That's unbelievable. That's crazy.
And at the time, we were still a punk band, we were still sleeping on couches,
So you got to tell me about James Brown. What was that all? What was that like?
Oh man, it was crazy. It was actually just, I think, half a year before he passed away. And he was kind of the headliner of this touring festival in Australia called Good Vibrations. And I'm telling you, he was as good as ever. He was as good as any footage I've ever seen of him. He was completely amazing still. Yeah. And really shocking when he passed away, because like everything you want to see from a James Brown show was there. Like his dance moves, his energy, his voice, everything was just amazing. But we shared a backstage, and one day I went to take a piss, and who do I run into in the bathroom but Mr. James Brown, right? Hopefully we both washed our hands before we shook hands, but I shook his hand in a backstage bathroom, and it's very hard to explain this, but it was so scary. It was just so scary meeting him.
Yeah.
No, but it was something. I mean, I met John Leckie, who's the producer of Stone Roses' debut album, and I was completely in awe of meeting John Leckie, but I could still, talk to him. I have a normal conversation with him. I mean, I've met, of course, the Devo guys and all sorts of people, but they're not scary. It's not scary meeting your idols. It's weird and interesting and wonderful, but it's not scary. But James Brown, man, that was a different story. I mean, goddamn. And I remember just feeling this sensation of my life source just being sucked through my hand and into his spirit or something like that. And I was like, I was kind of shaken by the whole thing. And I mean, this is 2006, and just talking about it is like, I met something evil that day. You know what I mean? Just something. It's a terrible thing for me to say, but that's just how it felt. It's so odd.
So you guys are on tour, and Coca-Cola's coming to you, but then so's everybody else. It's Apple, it's Google, it's Logitech, and fa-fa-fa's being used in movies and television. I mean, that just completely blows up. I mean, it's not just one great deal. It's a whole big fat bunch of them. And the amazing part about it is, when I listen to the first record, I as great as that song is, there are songs in that record I like much better than Fa Fa Fa.
That's a very interesting thing to point out, because when that album was released, it ended up being number 35 of the best albums of the year in New Musical Express. So and everything from Rolling Stone magazine and because Pitchfork back then was still like a baby nerd blog in Chicago, and we got to know those guys. And so everybody wrote about it. So it was so weird. We were reviewed all over the planet, and we were just releasing it on our own label. And it wasn't like, we went to business school or anything. I don't even think we to this day has ever registered that label anywhere. It's just like it's a hobby thing, you know. We've released a bunch of friends and they get paid and everything, but it's a very simple operation. I don't have a fucking clue how we got reviewed all over the planet. I don't know. I really don't know. But not a single one of them was talking about Fa Fa Fa. Not ever, not a single one.
Well, that's just the thing. I mean, I was listening to it a few days ago, and I thought like Laurie
Yeah.
was fantastic.
Everybody talked about Laurie.
Yeah.
Everybody talked about Laurie and Computer Camp Love. Laurie, that's right.
Those are the two I was going to mention. And the funny part about it is, Computer Camp Love. I mean, it's so clearly Summer Nights from Greece, and a song about Laurie Anderson, which is I mean, as brilliant as she is, it's not a typical subject for any kind of pop song. But those songs, it's interesting that they chose Fa 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 over those other songs. There just had to be something that connected to that song on a corporate level that nothing else could have.
Yeah, and again, I don't quite get it, because like in hindsight, a lot of people say, "Oh, Datarock sound like Talking Heads." We really don't. But that one song sounds a little bit like Talking Heads, of course. But it also sounds like television's, Marky Moon.
Yeah.
Right. That's where the riff. That's what I was thinking about when I did the, all that, right? And also like the basic riff. I was thinking Marky Moon by television, and then I thought, that's how I recorded the voice, by the way. The reason why it's called Fa 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 is because I didn't bother to write lyrics to that part. So it's not called Fa 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 because it's really like a big tribute to Psycho Killer. However, Psycho Killer, when it says Fa 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 better, is a tribute to Otis Redding's song called Fa 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 Fa, the sad song,
Yeah.
So that made sense. But to me, and what's really interesting about that song in 2005, nobody was listening to Talking Heads in 2005. So, for us to pay tribute to Talking Heads on that song was as weird as paying tribute to Laurie Anderson. And mind you, at the time, Laurie Anderson was still touring as Laurie Anderson. So for us to pay tribute to Talking Heads in 2005, that didn't happen. Like 2006 and 7, suddenly you started hearing remixes of, Once in a Lifetime or whatnot, because the whole indie dance came back and new wave became new rave and all of that, But yeah, it's a one of a kind on the album. It's very different to the rest of the album, but it's equally just a fanboy kind of song where we pay tribute to kind of Talking Heads and the New York scene of the mid-late 70s. And it wasn't a hype at all back in 2005, 6 or 7. So I never got it. I don't understand why they picked it up. What else does it remind you of? Perhaps a tiny little bit about something like Peter, Björn, and Johns, or Simin Mobile Disco. Or, I don't know. The bass riff is really easy to remember, and it's easy to say Fa Fa Fa. Mind you, Fa 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 isn't mentioned until 3.5 minutes into the song. So it's not like we're opening with the chorus singing Fa Fa Fa. So everything about this is odd. And think about this. It's not just a few commercials. It's the competitors. It's Apple, Google, Microsoft, and Samsung. What the fuck?
I mean, that's incredible. Were there bidding wars to get the licensing for this song, or what happened?
Well, I mean, as I said, we were kind of business savvy enough to get good representation, right? So we got it wasn't exactly a bidding war, but of course our representatives started saying, well, this is a very valuable song and you have to pay up, buddy boy. But the Coca-Cola ad, I mean, we never saw that money, because what we decided is just like this is fuck you money.
Right.
This is money we can spend on music videos and touring to places that we can't really afford to go to, and start recording a new album and all of that. But then we started for the first time of our lives, we started making a little bit of money on Datarock, because it was really a hobby project for like 8 years. So it wasn't a bidding war, but it was certainly an important part of our income.
Oh, I would imagine. But it's funny because at that point, a lot of artists were seeing their music kind of being used in that way, like Moby, for example. And that is a very interesting story, because Moby was, he's pretty oral about being a vegan, right? Right.
He's pretty he's a political artist. Yet all of the songs on that particular album was sold like 10 times each, something like that. And that was shocking that a political artist like him did that, because when we were sitting in this backstage room in Amsterdam getting a phone call for Coca-Cola, you know, when you're in a punk environment, that's not a cool thing to do. That's a complete sellout.
Totally.
You know, back in 2005, that was not easy for us to just jump on it, because you were really, and also, you know, if you made money on music, that really meant that you made shit music. That's kind of what it meant back in 2005. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean the reality is that's not true at all.
No.
You can say that Moby sold out, but you know Moby never has to work again for the rest of his life.
No, but also I agree with you, and to me it was I think because we obviously we ended up having some discussions about it, right? But I just said, okay, so what exactly is the big difference here? We wouldn't stop a commercial radio channel broadcasting our songs.
Right.
Now that's as commercial of an entity as most companies, and of course there is some stigma connected to Coca-Cola. I mean, all big companies have, you know, some troubling stories around them, but I mean, most of the companies you work with as musicians have some difficult sides, right? Even if you work, if you play in a festival, what about everybody who works there voluntarily? Are they insured? Like how is employment status for people working at the clubs, the festivals, the whatnot? You know. Also, like when it comes to environmental stuff, I mean, seriously, we played shows in 36 countries. Our carbon footprints are so dark, you know. So to us it was like, okay, if we want to be realistic, this is perhaps the only way we can generate an income, like a surplus that we can reinvest. This will be it. And also, what is it really but an alternative radio? You know what I mean? If we put a song in a video game, say for instance we have songs in 10 of the different FIFA games, right? This is how they calculate it themselves in EA. They say each sold FIFA game is played for 100 hours by 2.5 people, right? So presumably 100 times 2.5 people will hear us per sold game, which is 10 times 10 million. Then it's equally many pirate copies. So then you have 20 times 100 times 2.5. That's how many times your song get a spin just on one video game. How can that not be amazing? That is like having a radio hit.
You see,
You
well,
know?
I was going to say that. I mean, it's really a matter of your perspective. If you had an album that sold 20 million copies, you know, there's always going to be some people who will say, "Well, you sold out," but that's not your fault that happened. You know, you just put out a really good album. It's really what the market dictates.
But and that's the other thing I wanted to point out. I mean, all of these synchronizations with Datarock happened after we made those songs. And we made them with no management or intent to sell them as synchronization, right? But I think perhaps, you know, when shit like that happens to you many times, and then you go back in the studio and you're thinking, which song are we going to spend a week producing in a studio that costs, you know, $1,000 a day? Are we going to go with this song that is likely to end up in a synchronization, or we're going to go with this song that we don't think is going to end up in a synchronization, you know?
Right.
So eventually it comes and bites you in the ass. And the interesting part of that is that every time we release something that we thought would, you know, be synced, we didn't on purpose try to write songs that could be synced, but it's hard to not be affected. You know what I mean?
Of course.
None of those times when we tried anything happened. It only happened when we didn't give a fuck. It's really funny, huh?
It is. I mean, it is funny, but that's kind of the way any successful artist. It comes when they least expect it, or like a song that, you know, you hear this time and time again. An artist will write a song. It took them 30 seconds to write it. That's the song people remember, not the one it took them a year and a half to write.
It took 30 seconds to write And it's that song. The other songs, like the songs like that sound like super dumb. We spent like super, you know, long time, sometimes years making some of the songs. But that Fa took like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Here's something really hilarious about the song. This is really interesting. When we made that first album, I mean, we didn't have money. That's just how it is. We didn't have any money. We were students and we're dirt poor. But the producer of the studio, he was a dear friend of us, and he used to be a singer in basically a punk band. So we told him, hey, we don't have any money, but I mean, people seem to care about Datarock, and I'm pretty sure we'll sell some albums and we'll pay you if we get some money, you know? And he was just like, yeah, whatever, cool, let's do it. And then we recorded the album, and we didn't even have money to pay him, right? So he produced it without getting a fee, just the promise of getting paid if we ever could, you know? So therefore, we had to do it very effectively. And Fa 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 was recorded, and then you do a mix down, right, just from the desk from the day you recorded. And then later on, when the songs were done, we were mixing all the songs over and over again. But Fa Fa Fa, we opened it, was like, we were like, fuck it, that's okay. It's okay like it is, right? We never mixed it. What we released is just how we recorded it and how the setting on the desk was when we recorded it. We never even mixed the motherfucker. It's hilarious.
You know what I really have enjoyed about, you know, listening to the music and getting really familiar or a lot more familiar with it than I had been is it sounds like you guys are having so much goddamn fun making these songs. I mean, there's a sense of humor about it. There's a sense that the music is serious, but you're not taking yourselves too seriously. It's so refreshing to hear that, because so many times when in music you see, you know, some guy just becoming this cliched mouthpiece of some sort of political agenda that means nothing to nobody, as opposed to just a piece of entertainment that people can absorb and really have a great time with, which I think was really the point of doing this in the first place. It's just so much fun to listen to.
Thank you. I'm really happy you point that out, because that's really what we've been hoping for Datarock to be. And to be honest, I mean, we're a pretty serious, grumpy group of guys. I mean, we live. Okay, look out the window. It's been raining. It's been raining for days. This is where I live, Bergen, Norway. Without exaggerating, it's raining 230 days a year. Okay, and it's freezing cold.
Yep.
And in addition to the 230 days of rain, you have probably 50 days of mist. Like, you know, it rains more than 230 days a year. And also, I mean, we all have, university educations, and one of the guys has a PhD, and you know, we're the classic grumpy motherfuckers, right? and for us, Datarock was kind of our way to have fun, and that's how we started the band. For instance, I said, okay, I'm in if I don't have to sing and not play the guitar or write lyrics. I just want to play drums, and I can't even play drums. And that's how I sort of joined the team, because I just wanted to be the drummer. But then the guy who was supposed to sing got divorced from his Norwegian wife, so he went back to Boston. A guy called Kevin O'Brien, by the way, and his group of friends back home was the guys from Bloodhound Gang and that kind of environment,
Sure.
right? So the guy who was supposed to sing, he was like this like a beatnik, like a late 50s beatnik character. I was just supposed to play the drums, and then it ended up with me, you know, singing and writing the songs and stuff. But we didn't start off with that as an intention, because I was in music high school. Oh, I was one of those guys who went to music high schools, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Like my guitar exam, the guy who gave me a 5 out of 6 on my guitar exam had the front cover of Guitar Player internationally that year. You know, so my background when I was a kid was I was one of those nerdy instrument kids who probably dreamed of going to Berkeley or something like that.
Right.
And then I got so sick of that way of taking music seriously, so I actually stopped doing music for many, many years. And the reason why we fired up Datarock again was because something really interesting was happening in the club scene, where you had like a mix of intelligent young people who might be a mix of, you know, art student or, well, university students, or, you know, conservatory students, or architect student, authors and whatnot, who came together and created this new alternative club scene, which I think in the US was probably very similar to Norway, with like Misshapes in New York City. And we had like a mix of, you know, late 70s, early 80s, like no wave, new wave, Depeche Mode, you know, Joy Division, Ibar Nitz, you know, Tom Tom Club, Devo, mixed with new techno and electronic music, right? And that whole scene became, sometimes it was, you know, aggressively political. You had a lot of U.S. female groups. Well, Canadian Peaches. What are they called? What was it? Someone called lesbian dopeheads and mopeds, something like that. Detachable penis. I don't know exactly.
King Missile, yeah.
But suddenly you had this very an interesting punk club scene that reminded me of how we started doing music, which was thrash metal. And thrash metal, when we were kids, thrash metal was in Norway, it became black metal, and those are the guys who kind of, I think, misunderstood thrash metal and didn't understand that it was supposed to be fun, and it became a little bit too seriously. Burning churches isn't what they were doing in California when they did thrash metal,
Right.
But what happened with Datarock is we saw how much fun that alternative club scene kind of reinvented, and we felt really comfortable in that world because it reminded us of the punk rock, thrash metal, kind of hardcore background we had. And we were kind of adults already because we were like 25, and suddenly it was like an adult, smart ass, but dumb as fuck, fun club scene, And that's the only reason why we started the band, because we thought, well, that's a fun scene. That we want to be part of that scene. So that's kind of the whole kind of argument for us to do Datarock has been for us to have like a fun thing in our lives, our personal Prozac, and what really has inspired us throughout all these years is the 1,000 shows we have played in 36 countries, because we've kind of seen ourselves in the audience, right? 18-year-old grumpy kid who's actually happy and shouting and dancing, and at the end of the show he swings his t-shirt and he leaves the place with a girl, and that's really what kind of kept us going, that we saw that we brought a lot of joy and happiness to a lot of people who perhaps don't usually have fun that way. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I think as a member of the audience, when you get a sense that you're being entertained and the artist actually wants you to have a great time as opposed to he's doing it just for himself. I mean,
oh man, yeah.
It's expensive to go to shows. Here in the States, it's very expensive. When you don't get that, you kind of walk away feeling, I've kind of been cheated here a little bit. Which is interesting because I've seen a couple of videos of you guys playing live, and I think the fun part about it is, never mind the fact you're all in the same colored tracksuit or whatever, you're actually putting on a show. I mean, these are exciting performances, which I think kind of adds to what you're talking about. It's like you're there to have fun, and it's kind of hard not to have fun when you see that being reflected on a stage.
Yeah, exactly. And so many people have told us that, and which is also inspiring, of course, right? Because so many people have told us that exact thing, that it's such infectious effect when you see people on stage having fun, and we clearly want to spend time together, and we clearly make each other laugh, but I have to say, because of the suits, it's a little bit easier for us to get into that character. So I mean, how if you meet an old ex-girlfriend, how kind of time has stood still because you haven't seen that person more than put together for perhaps a few minutes or hours since you broke up 10 years ago. Time stands still, right? Okay, I only wear that motherfucking tracksuit when I'm on stage, and I've done 1,000 shows in that tracksuit, but it's only 1,000 hours, right? So every time I put that tracksuit on, I'm basically that guy from 2005, like this.
Yeah.
Right now I'm 47, but when I put on that tracksuit, I'm not. It's such a transformative thing. Put on the tracksuit, and especially putting on the glasses. So I think it makes it the whole thing with the costumes and the fact that we have the same clothes and over time, some routine to what we do, and we kind of snap back into that mental state that we were in when we were a hell of a lot younger.
Well, I can imagine like how the band Kiss must have felt, when they were wearing makeup for years, and all of a sudden they said, nah, let's be like a regular band and like everybody else, and suddenly people stopped giving a shit because it wasn't what they wanted, and they weren't living up to the hype of what they used to be. It's like that costuming, that the uniformity of it, that was really part of the excitement of those shows.
Man, totally. And there must be a good reason why they did this. It must be some reason, like for instance, perhaps they didn't get laid as much or something. I don't know. Why the hell did Kiss remove their costumes? That's absurd.
I
Man.
don't know. Stupidest thing ever did.
But by the way, they played their very last show in Norway recently. It was people were so emotional about it. Like our drummer actually went to 5 of their Kiss cruises. He's a fanboy. He is a fanboy. But I'll tell you one thing. We once did a tour without the jacksuits, and you don't want me on that stage. You want that guy. You know.
You're right. Yeah.
It just didn't work. It didn't work. You know, it didn't work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, can you imagine like Devo in jeans and t-shirts? Like, no, it would never happen.
It would be so wrong. And I mean, it would be so wrong. Like we were hanging out with Devo just a couple of weeks ago because we're playing in Norway, and we're saying, you won't believe this. I don't know if I shouldn't say anything. I'm just gonna say it anyways. So when I mixed this latest Datarock album, I was actually staying at Jerry Casale's place in Santa Monica when we were in the studio with Mark Rankin in Malibu. So I know him really well. And then when they came to Oslo, they were just in Oslo for like less than 24 hours, and so we only got to see them right before they went on stage, and then they basically left again. And you won't believe it. I came backstage, and I think they were a little bit ill, right? And I mean, he's 75.
Yeah.
Right. So one thing is, if you're ill, I would probably just call you crybaby. But if you're 75 and you're ill, entitled to be ill. And I was like, I was worried. He's a super nice guy, but I was so worried because I mean, the guy's going to be on stage for more than an hour, screaming and shouting, and I mean, they're dancing, and their whole show is fun and all, but it's it's pretty aggressive. It's pretty demanding stuff, right? So we said, okay, good luck, man, and hope to see you after the show. Hug it out, and I leave these. Well, and Mark Mothersbaugh was there too, and he's also 70 something, right?
Yeah.
And they were a little bit tired because they've been doing shows every day. And then they go out on stage in those costumes. And they did a fucking killer show at what are their age? 73 and 75. They put on the suit, they do the thing. Nobody could tell for a second that 20 minutes before they weren't feeling good,
Yeah, right.
So it's very transformative. It's very, very transformative. It's a good trick. But I mean, a lot of people do use costumes without even us noticing. Like, for instance, I know a lot of the Norwegian black metal artists. You won't believe how normal these people are in real life. Like, they're the sweetest, most intelligent, super nice guys. And then they put on that makeup, and then they transform into this person, right? Same thing with I think it's like that with a lot of different artists that, they go through this transformative thing with, if it's makeup or if it's clothes or whatever it is. But I mean, we couldn't be bothered putting on goddamn makeup, man. But the guys,
tracksuits are good enough.
Yeah, totally. It's even almost too much.
Yeah, but you're totally right about that. So I've interviewed Jerry, and he was everything I wanted him to be. A lot older than I remember him, but he was everything I wanted to be. He was very cool.
Yeah.
He was in an environment that looked very futuristic, and we talked about de-evolution for like a good 20 minutes, and it was like that's exactly what I wanted to get out of him. But on the other hand, there's
but it's also, I mean, it's very interesting with, for instance, Jerry, because have you noticed he doesn't even have gray hair?
No,
it's his natural hair color, and we can just imagine how they lived. They released their first single on the same label as Sex Pistols in '76 on Stiff Records, right? And they were part of the CBGB scene, and also like the pretty successful entertainment business in the '80s. So you must assume they weren't like particularly healthy guys,
right?
But you meet those guys, and you meet Jerry, and he has the energy of a kid,
without a doubt. Without
he has such youthful energy, man. It's like it's so inspiring.
And that's happened. I've seen that a couple of times. Where like someone who has been in it for so long, they just get so energized by performing and getting back into it. Like a couple of years ago, I talked to Russell Mael from Sparks, same age.
Yeah.
In fact, they may be even a little bit older than Devo because they've been around since early '70s. And I saw them live, and these guys were like just a few years younger than my father, who's 80, and I'm like, how the fuck are they doing this? Because I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
Like I can't even imagine my 80-year-old dad being in that position to be dancing on a stage for 2 hours. Just unbelievable natural adrenaline and energy. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
But I also think, I mean, of course, doing what you love and getting, the positive feedback and all of that energizes you. But yeah, I find it bewildering. Even people that we know have been through decades of substance abuse.
Mhm.
You see someone like, I mean, seriously, if you see Nick Cave live on stage now, and then you go back and look at footage from when he was young, I mean, it's amazing that the guy is still alive.
Sure.
But then you see the guy on stage, and there's no doubt about it. He's better than ever.
Yeah.
He is better than he ever was. And the most absurd part of it is he fucking looks younger. He looks like a young man. Okay, my eye vision isn't perfect, but he looks, his body language and his energy and his expression and his extreme presence, and how he can make 20,000 people be dead silent for 1.5 hours. The guy doesn't even have in-ears. He doesn't even have wedges. He does the entire show on side fills, and he must be 70. And then you see a guy like David Byrne. I mean, David Byrne is amazing. Like on Saturday, I saw John Lydon with Public Image Limited live in London, and I mean, that's an unhealthy character, but he was amazing. He was, as amazing as. Have you heard the Public Image Limited Live in Paris album from 1978?
Sure.
It was just as good. The guy must be 72 or something like that, you know? It must be something about music, but I mean, it's also, I mean, we don't exactly work in a coal mine. I mean, we are kind of privileged.
But there's occupational hazards along the way, like you said. I mean, whether it's substance or just time or bad health. I mean, the human body's not built to sustain that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, and it's a lot of okay, of course, substance abuse, but also there's a lot of psychological issues, right?
Sure.
And of course, there's a link between, well, I mean, of course, what came first, but psychological issues and substance abuse, right? But yeah, you're right, and that's been also, by the way, extremely interesting to see from our perspective, because I mean, even though we played in 36 countries and we played crisscross America so many times, I think we did 23 tours in America. So it's very interesting to kind of come to the same part of every town around the world. You kind of meet the same group of people, kind of in every country, every town, everywhere we go around the world, and it's very interesting to see how different the same scene is from country to country. Like in the US, you very rarely you get the feeling that it's a lot of drugs in the US. Very rarely. Okay, of course it's weed, but whatever, right? But then in the UK, man, oh my God, that is a laboratory, And the same thing with Australia. It's just crazy, dude.
Yeah.
It's like absolutely mental. Like even nude people are just fucking wasted on whatever pills that I don't even know the name of, know. So it's very different. And then it's also interesting to see how this alternative music scene is very young in some places, but then some places the average age might be 20 years older.
Yeah.
So for instance, if we play for the same kind of audience as we would in, say, Los Angeles, and we play for the same kind of audience in, for instance, Buenos Aires, the average age might be 15 years older, but it's the same vibe.
Sure.
It's very interesting. So it's been being in Datarock has been a wonderful way to experience this planet of ours. Because we've really been everywhere. Like we've been places that I didn't even know existed, like Winnipeg, Canada. Who goes to Winnipeg,
Even people in Winnipeg don't want to go to Winnipeg.
I think you're right. There is actually a very, very fascinating documentary from Winnipeg called 40 Years of One-Night Stands. And one-night stand doesn't mean sleeping with a woman for once only. It's a expression from stage performances that toured and only did one performance in each town. And it's a very interesting documentary about the ballet in Winnipeg. So when I went to Winnipeg, because I'm such a goddamn weirdo, I knew about this, and I actually went to the ballet in Winnipeg. So I kind of got something out of it. So it's fun. Even going to Winnipeg you should go everywhere once.
Yeah. I mean, just the idea that there's ballet in Winnipeg. It's like you're watching, like, ballerinas wearing, Gore-Tex parkas just to stay warm while they're dancing.
No, but it's a funny story and it's very inspiring. And those kind of stories is, for instance, with Datarock, I've done a lot of lectures and shit, like inspiration talks at all sorts of crap, because we took a little interesting, weird ass project very, very far, right? And of course, we've been, what's the word? Endurance. I mean, going through that hundreds and hundreds of shows without really making any profit or making any money, and living off, backstage food and beer. That's actually a lot of fun, but it takes a certain kind of person to sort of bother to do that, And one of the kind of inspirations is, for instance, shit like that little ballet in Winnipeg. Because what happened is that these upper class women from the UK, they were so ignorant that they didn't know about the depression in the US. So they went to the US for fortune, And then they came to New York and it's like, oh shit, big mistakes. So they, by some random accident, they ended up in Winnipeg. And the only thing these two women knew how to do was to teach ballet. So in the 30s, they start this little group of whatever. I mean, how many people lived in Winnipeg in the 30s? Must be no one, right? But then the documentary it follows them from the 30s to 1981, when they, by definition, was officially regarded as the best ballet in the world, in front of the Bolshoi Ballet in Moscow.
Right.
And that's just how it is. And their prima ballerina, Diane Hart, or whatever her name was, she was the prima ballerina of the world that year. And that's, I love those kind of stories. And I really love how kind of Datarock ended up with a little bit like a fairy tale story like that, against all odds, this weird ass project that we do in this tiny, tiny little city in Norway. We end up playing like, fucking, Reading and Leeds and Lollapalooza and Hurricane and Roskilde and Coachella and, Jimmy Kimmel Live, and end up on like best songs of the year in Rolling Stone magazine. Like, how the hell did that happen?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I almost found the most fun with Datarock. How it's almost like, well, the little guy against the world, and hey, we made it, And it doesn't have to be a goddamn big deal. I don't give a fuck. As long as we're having fun and we're still friends, I'm happy.
Yeah.
And I never understood people who made a fortune on music. I don't even understand how can you make a fortune on music? Like every time you hear about someone who makes a fortune, you see their entourage, and they're like, hey man, if they go down the street, there's like 27 people following them.
Sure.
If everybody is on a payroll, how the hell do you support your goddamn lifestyle? I'll tell you one thing, brother, that money is gone before you even see it.
Of course it is. Yeah. I do want to ask you about the new record, and it's taken a while
Sure.
before we got there, but
Sure.
the Media Consumption Pyramid is just great. There's some songs on there that I really enjoyed. TikTok, Video Store, Metaverse. They're all really great. I think one of the things that I really like about it is, and it's true of all your music, there's a retro futuristic vibe where everything is still very much in the present. That's not an easy thing to pull off. And I think the record is awesome.
Thank you. I mean, it's easy for us to be retro because we're adults. So what we really do know kind of by heart is, is old shit. So that's how that goes. But yeah, we're really trying to not be too sentimental about the past, because the past has already happened, and yeah, we do try to kind of try desperately to live now, and that's also how we ended up with that. The lyrical content, which gave the song, the album, the title, Media Consumption Pyramid, right? Because it really, in honesty, if you listen to the music, like, say a song like Disobedience, that's straight out of No Wave, New York City in 1978, And something like, if you listen to something like Metaverse, it's like, it's not insanely far away from even Chemical Brothers when they were called Dust Brothers in 92,
Right.
So I don't know if there is a lot of hardcore 2023 elements to the album, but we certainly didn't want to sort of paint ourselves in a corner, because we did everything ourselves. We produced it ourselves, recorded it ourselves, and producing is really making those million editing decisions
Sure.
that a co-producer or engineer does. And very often, if you read about an album, you realize that, oh, so those 2 electronic producers that you thought made the album, they're 2 out of 50 people who worked on that album.
Yeah.
That's very often the case. And sometimes you read about, okay, oh no, none of the beats were programmed by the people involved in the band. It was just these professional doctors with doctors' uniforms in a doctor studio kind of,
Performance surgery on
So
music.
yeah, but we just did everything ourselves, and then I realized that I don't want to live in a world where I'm completely isolated, right? So that's how I sort of came up with the idea of talking to our mastering engineer in England, who's called Mike Marsh, and he's such a goddamn legend. He's a magician. What he does is, I really don't understand what the hell he's doing, but he does something that makes everything sound so goddamn amazing. and we've been a lot of back and forth with him because he's been mastering a lot of our stuff since 2016 or even before. And this time I reached out to him and I said, hey man, every time I ask you if you can push the low end or whatever frequencies that you say isn't there, so you can't do it because our mix is so bad. If it was up to you, who would you prefer that we worked with for you to get what I think you're getting, but you're not getting? How do we make sure he gets the best possible mix? Who should we work with? And then he mentioned Mark Rankin, and he mentioned, because he used to work with Mark Rankin. Because now Mark Rankin is famous for having produced Adele and the last album for Queens of the Stone Age and Weezer and Florence and the Machine and all of this. But he was a mastering engineer at the Exchange, and he was just one of the engineers that, together with Mike Marsh. So they're old pals.
Right.
The first thing he ever did as a producer and mixer was, I think, Block Party. Do you remember Block Party, that London band? Yeah. So anyway, so they're old friends, and that's why Mark Rankin kind of perhaps bothered to pick up the phone. Because we said we're an indie band. We're on our own label. We don't have a huge budget or anything. We have plenty of time and we have lots of songs. So if you can give us a good deal, we can give you a lot of songs. You know what I mean? Something like that. And then, so via Mike Marsh, our mastering engineer, we ended up working with 2 of the world's most celebrated professionals of their trade.
Sure.
Steve Dubb has fucking 5 Grammys, and it's not by chance. And what's interesting about it is also he doesn't have Grammys from the 80s or 90s or 60s. He even Chemical Brothers' last album called No Geography was even rewarded with the Grammy for Best Electronic Album, and was it 2021? That was his album. And this is a really important thing to keep in mind. It's very creatively positive to bring other people into the equation. It really is. Because should one of these people say something that you really don't like, you can always say, I don't want to do that. I don't want you to do that, right? So actually, that's the opposite, right? Everything they contributed with is so important. I have to tell you a fun story. For instance, on Heart-Shaped Circle, we made some beats. And even though Datarock's drums and beats and all that sound very simple, it's so many channels. You can't believe it. Just, for instance, a song called California has 102 tracks. So it's 102 individual sources of sound on most of them in stereo. So even our drum tracks is it's analog drum machines, it's of course soft synths, and it's of course programmed, but it's also live percussion and live drums, and it's a hell of a lot of stuff in most simple of Datarock songs. Anyways, so Steve Dubb calls me late night one evening from Liverpool, and he says, hey, I'm working on Heart-Shaped Circle, and the drums are a little bit jingly jangly. So I said, okay, if I fix it. And I've fixed it so many times, so I'm assuming he means just moving about wave shapes a little bit so they're in line or something like that. So I'm like, oh yeah, sure, be my guest. If you bothered to do that, that's great. I didn't expect you to spend time on that, because that's time consuming, and it's actually not mixing, it's Pro Tools editing, which is a completely different occupation, kind of, right? So I said, yeah, please, if you want to do that, that's great. Next day comes, and he has erased our beats and percussion and everything and just made his own, right? and then I played it for a friend, and I said, because he followed the entire process, so he knew what reference mix we had done, and he was listening to it, and he said, okay, because I said, oh, I'm a little bit bewildered. What do I say? And then my friend said, but you know, what you did is shit, and what he did is great. You know? So even though you can, in 2003, you can kind of do everything yourself, you shouldn't. You should always let someone else, you know, tear apart what you do a little, and some interesting.
It's always good to get a fresh set of ears, especially when you get like really
It
too close to a project. You lose your objectivity and you start.
Totally.
Yeah, you get kind of hyper focused on something, and it may not be what's for the best.
No, you're right. And what's very interesting when you work with people like Steve Dubb and Mark Rankin, I mean, these are really, you know, unique people. They're not just some mixers. I mean, they're super producers and mixers and everything, right? But what they are is they're great editors. I mean, storytellers. So you know, if you recorded something and say it is 100 tracks, you know every little detail that is there, and you want it to be there. And because you've seen it and you felt it when you played it yourself, or you don't want it to disappear, right? But sometimes, for instance, you'll hear like amazing, say, metal albums that where the drums are very tiny and small, but they do the trick. They do what they're supposed to do, but they're some kind of small, like, for instance, thrash metal sometimes, you know? And it's completely wrong for some kinds of music that the drums are so dynamic, like you're listening to a jazz album. It's not supposed to feel like you're sitting playing drums yourself. You're supposed to visually picture that the drums are over there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes that might be the case, not necessarily, but you get my drift. And that's what these mixers do. They kind of reappropriate what is there in a way that tells the story the way it should be told. Like they put accent on the right word so the comedy works. You know, they take away something so the comedy works. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So getting someone in who is basically directing, that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're directing. And it's really interesting with that kind of people, because as I said, I met John Leckie, who produced Stone Roses' debut, and tons of other famous records. But he told me he's not educated as a sound engineer or anything. He worked at Abbey Road. He actually worked at recordings with Beatles. But his education is as a cameraman for film. That's it. That's what he's trained at. So when you listen to Stone Roses' Waterfall or whatever, and the way it's so beautifully layered, and how the voicing of the drummer, the high-pitched voices is the drummer singing, and how the guitars might be 13 levels of guitar, and just how leveled it is, and how beautifully the stories are told. That's not just like a sonic twist some knobs or whatever. It's storytelling on a very high level. So that's what we did with this album. We went out and we were lucky enough to send our pile of dirt over to someone to clean it and make it.
They did it. Freddie, this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. And I've really, like I said, I've really enjoyed getting to know your work, and I've really enjoyed the new record, Media Consumption Pyramid. It's just awesome.
I'm so happy. I really appreciate it. You can't believe it. We spent 3 years making that album. To hear that is just,
Well,
amazing. Thank you so much.
enjoy.
Thank
Listen,
you so much.
thank you so much for spending the time today. It's been a real joy.
Sure. Thank you. Hey, thanks for calling me. It made my day a hell of a lot more interesting.
I'm glad I could help.
Hey, it's super nice. Thank you so much for the conversation and the compliments.
Thank you, Freddie. Have a great day. The name of the new Datarock album is called Media Consumption Pyramid, and I think you're going to love it. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to like it, rate it, share it with all your friends. Be sure to get all the updates on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. You can also email me at bax@rock102.com. I'd love to know what you think. Thanks to Z&M Home Buyers for their support, and thanks to you for listening to Baxie's Musical Podcast.